So I fall in the slot of livelihoods, cultural diversity, sustainability, mostly everything except health. But then obviously if artisans earn better, they'll be healthier. So I fall into health also. So good. It's interesting to be here because I'm a product of this thought process and therefore it's a very complicated thing we are doing. I'll try and set a small background for it, and somebody has to put up creative million PPT. I can't handle so many things. I'm sorry, I'm a little tech challenged. Okay, you just put it on and you'll sit here and I will say next and you will push slide. I'm sorry. Yeah, because I'm also trying to read something because otherwise I'll be all over the place and it will not be very productive. Okay, so just giving you a very quick backdrop. I'll spend 5 minutes on setting the agenda. Otherwise whatever I say will just sound like it's completely over the top. So we are in the sector of what we call today creative manufacturing. We don't call it handicrafts and handloom anymore. Yeah? So globally, the world's cultural creative industries are growing at some 20%. And I was at a meeting with the World Bank yesterday, and they were talking about their cultural creative vertical. And I said, look, you just got to split it into manufacturing and non-manufacturing. Don't split it with a straight line, split it with a very hazy line, like with a band. Yeah? But manufacturing practices, which were handicrafts and handloom in this country, have not received their due purely because they've always been in this haze of larger cultural creative industries. So for even an organization like the World Bank, they were a little zapped when they heard that. But I think this is the main issue, which is why to bring a focus, we say it's creative manufacturing. We do not say it's handicrafts and handlooms because that's very past century. You have to look at 22nd century, and the biggest and chiefest lens you have to look at is the lens of sustainability, because that is what the consumer of the future is going to want completely, and it is a very self-sustainable practice. It has always been. Global creative industries, okay, next slide. Global creative industries, okay. Now, no other country can actually advise us on what to do, because when we ask the British creative industries guys, I mean, have you anything to say to us? They says we don't, because we actually, all our creative industries are in gaming, animation, design, architecture. We have nothing in manufacturing. So we have the world's largest workforce in creative manufacturing, which is why we have to put the lens of creative manufacturing. Okay, now China has killed its creative manufacturing industry, right? Through the Cultural Revolution. So there was this big discussion that Li and Feng, which is like at $28 billion, internally they had a conference and they said, why has China not been able to build a fashion and lifestyle brand of any stature? It's because they don't have a performing culture today. It's largely dead. So there is a lot for this. Wait, I'll just go back up. One second. Next slide. Yeah, so we come to the numbers. India has $2 billion of market share. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, just give me 2 minutes. Yeah. India has the world's largest, most varied, decentralized creative production workforce. We have about 100 million artisans, which is 10%, 8% of our population. Primarily, it's a means of livelihood. Yeah? So it's focused on a consumer. It's a means of livelihood. Right? How is it going to spring into the 21st and 22nd century? That's the question for people like us. It's no longer about the next 5 years, 10 years. Because it is how and what is it going to morph into, keeping the best that it has and taking on the best that thinking of today should take to it. Yeah? It's not about culture being what it was in the past and preserving it that way. I think this whole culture and this whole discussion on sustainability, or even this discussion on distributed economics, distributed design, this is all going to become part of culture. So it's all got to do with culture. Yeah, so culture is not about a kantha embroidery something. It's not just about that. Yeah, but you can morph the two, and I think that's what we have to look to do. Yeah, um, so we have about 4 to 5% global market share, and for some reason I'm not able to scroll down. It's getting better. Okay, okay. I'll just give you some examples. So you are going to connect. So Industry Foundation has taken upon itself endeavor called Creative Million. Yeah. So we said, okay, we work. I mean, for the last 20 years, we've trained 30,000 artisans. We've built out a small company. It's at like $5 million in sales. And this whole impact investing and the traditional capitalist system of functioning is actually not going to impact grassroots artisans in a big way. I've learned over the last 20 years. Because we have a blended capital model, right? So we have a non-profit and a for-profit. So the for-profits raised impact investment, but when you're small and you raise investment, now the company is owned by investors. So how are you going to rethink the whole thing? Yeah? So we have in India something called Amul, right? It's owned by farmers and milkmen. It's a $3 billion in revenue. And Amul today impacts an ecosystem of about $8 billion in sales. If you look at all the other state mother dairies and all the other state, all the other things that it sort of incubated, what NDDB did. So we have said, we've taken it upon ourselves and said we will do Amul of creative manufacturing. Yeah? So for that, we just said we'll do 1 million artisans onto a common platform, and the platform should be owned by them. That's it. It should be 100% owned by them. Now, I'm going to just give you a small example, a small thing. At the last World Economic Forum at Davos, there was a session titled Green is the New Black. Today, 40% of global fashion customers want sustainable fashion. They want it overseas, not in India, overseas. So that is the trend for the future, right? So our creative manufacturing producers actually cater to fashion and lifestyle markets. So if you're looking at how the millennials are going to shop 10 years from now, 15 years from now, they're going to want a lot of sustainability, right? Okay, so this production base has a very low carbon footprint, and that is how it should be further evolved, right? It should have a lot of traceability built into it. So when a customer buys something, he should know from whom it came, how it was made. So that's what the customer is going to demand. So that's what we're looking at. Creative Million is also codenamed .next. So D is for design, O is for ownership, and T is for traceability. And next is for next generation. Because now the whole issue is that, like China, you won't have a next generation left. Malaysia has about 5,000 artisans left. So when a society is moving from blue collar to white collar, you will lose. So I don't think this is something we should lose. This is something we should build heavily upon. Take that as a foundation. So when we talk about Creative Million, and we say we want to bring 1 million people onto this platform, I'll just do some simple math with you. Minimum wage in this country is 1.5 lakh rupees. It used to be 1 lakh. It's just been made 1.5 lakhs. We also feel that if you expect your practitioners, if you want to give them some respect, you have to look at full-time work. You can't keep having this part-time work business. There's not much future in it. So we've done the math, and if you want to impact 1 million people, you've got to do $6 billion in sales. $6 billion in sales. At their price, their output, for them to earn 1.5 lakhs annually. So you have to think very disruptively about this. So we are trying to think disruptively. And this is where distributed design and distributed production fall into play. Okay, so I think we should do the next slide. Okay, next slide. So we are also have a huge focus on women in this whole thing. Now I'll come to why women, because this is interesting. It leads to aggregation and disaggregation. See, now the biggest problem in this sector is that it's got no aggregation. But if you will aggregate, then you should also have the ability to disaggregate and do this distributed. So it's quite an interesting anomaly, this aggregation and disaggregation. So the women we work with, we are saying it's very tough to aggregate men. So your entire microfinance movement is built on women. So our focus is women, right? Okay, next. So all these things will happen. Next. Next. So this is what we have. We have 2 producer companies. They supply to global brands like IKEA. They're completely compliant because when you're looking at the $6 billion of market, it's not going to be an Indian market. So it's about a global market, right? And global markets have their own needs and requirements. Next. So this is the story of the women. Next. I'll also, so this is going to be a little rambling conversation, but as designers, I wanted to bring into this, because when I see the basket, I wanted to talk about lean production practices. And I'm just giving you an example of how when we look at this sector, which is a cultural, traditional sector, you have to bring in the best of modern production practices, right? So it's not about keeping something the way it was. So we use lean production practices. So lean production practices evolved from artisanal production. So if you look at an assembly line of Toyota in Japan, a black Etios is followed by a blue Toyota is followed by a green something else. They're not churning out the same thing. So this definition of customization that we have, there is a lot of mass customization processes out there, which is also what needs to be brought to this sector. So if one woman weaves a basket by herself for IKEA, one of those baskets, the most skilled weaves one a day. But if you put them in a line of 4 weavers, where a helper is just doing the splicing, the semi-skilled is just doing the base, and the highly skilled is just doing the top, their production quadruples. So they do 4 baskets a day. So that's just one example of thinking which needs to go in. And next. Next. Okay, so our model, I'll now come to our model, how we are planning to go about it. We've started working on Creative Million over the last 18 months, very seriously. And because it needs to be owned by the community, we are looking for philanthropic and grant funding, and we are talking to multilateral agencies. The plan is in 3 to 5 years, it gets to about 250 crores. And that's when you do interesting capital structuring and raise investment for the future growth. Yeah, so that comes in later. So we have started pilots in 4 states. Karnataka, UP, not started, in the process of closing the funding. Karnataka, UP, Rajasthan and Odisha. Yeah. What is going to happen? There is a slide on 6 C's. Right? Yeah. This is a slide on 6 C's. So one of the first things we analyze is why this sector doesn't move. Is you've got to do all these C's together, right? You've got to do capacity, which is training. You've got to do channel, which is market access. You've got to do access to capital, because if they have to own the value chain, capital has to be raised on their books. Then you've got to do create, design. You've got to do connect, which is the digital connectivity. And you've got to do create, connect, construct. So construct is incubation and acceleration of these producer-owned entities. So they're like startups. So the whole plan is to do about 30,000 grassroots startups of 30 women each, and that's how you'll get to 1 million. But they get aggregated under a business excellence center, which is a mix of physical and digital. Okay? So the ERP systems they use, how will design get to all these people? Yeah? So the whole ecosystem is being worked on. We have a partnership with Mindtree. So Mindtree is helping us to work out the exploded systems, the disaggregated systems for the whole process. I'll now just give an example of the pilot we are starting in Karnataka, where we've got some funding from UNDP, which is about, if you look at apparel, it's 85%, apparel production is 85% of Bangladesh's GDP. It's 8 to 10% of India's GDP. It creates the maximum jobs. It's the largest consuming industry, India and globally. Yeah? So we've started with one vertical called value added apparel, VAP. So that's embroidery, block printing, screen printing, whatever, all the skills that go into all the garments you're wearing. So we've exploded. So if you want to put up a apparel production unit in a village, you need a building. You need 100, 200 machines. So the most critical thing that you will not find is the building. You will not. So looking at our decentralized model, we've said, okay, let's explode this into small buildings. So we've taken 100, so it's a small ecosystem for 300 producers where there are 25 per building. Yeah, and how at the end of it, do you still get a state-of-the-art garment out? So the whole value chain has been exploded. So the cutting, the master design work is done just in one hub. The remaining is spokes, etc., etc. So that level of thinking, then how is the design moving to this? Yeah. So there we are looking at building out an app with designers. That how do we get out of the 100 or 1,000 designers in fashion graduating out of all our design schools? How do we get them, how do we give them a clear brief for the 4 seasons? Yeah? Autumn, winter, spring, summer, etc. How do we give them very clear briefs? How do we give them very clear retail data that it's short kurta or long kurta? Because essentially we've taken the processes that we used at Mother Earth or Fab India or wherever. And these are the kinds of prints that are in fashion next season, whole thing, end to end. So that even a designer gets a very tight brief through an app, yeah, is able to plug in, is able to do the collection, is able to get it long distance sampled from the production hubs. So we're looking at this platform in great detail, yeah, and similarly for the other verticals. So we're looking at leather and natural fiber, and we're looking at jewelry, and we're looking at personal accessories. So we're looking at stuff that markets are very, very focused on and trying to build out a distributed design and a distributed production model, which should impact 1 million people. So our target for the first 5 years is 200,000, and we have a great partner in Srishti, because the Impact Edge Lab, which plays a critical part in building the startup ecosystem for this. So the courses right now are being built for designers and the Mint program and the Cream program. But now we'll get into discussions about building programs for what we call the micro enterprise leader, the MEL. Because these 25 women will have a leader. So all her business processes, how does she handle the whole ecosystem? And those are the other kinds of courses we'll be looking at through Impact Edge. And yes, am I okay with it? Is there anything else in the slideshow? Nothing else? Nothing else? Yeah. So essentially it has to move from a network to a platform to a movement. It's that, I mean, there are lots of words and terminologies for it. There's one common parlance going around. It's called the Uberization of the sector. So Uber is handling 3 C's. It handles channel, which is the market. It handles capacity, that's a driver. And it also does a bit of capital, because it gives you money for the cars. So the driver has his car. So in our case, our producers need production setups. They need access to better equipment. Yeah. So I was with the Rajasthan state government yesterday, and they were saying we will do tie and dye in Churu. I said it's not just about doing tie and dye at Churu. They need an environment treatment plant, because the dye that they throw out has to be treated sustainably. So because that's the promise you will give the consumer, that if you buy tie and dye from Creative Million, it's going to be 100% sustainable. So the money is around. I also just wanted to bring up another flavor of the day, which one can add to this conference. There's something called convergence. There is no dearth of money anywhere in the world. There's a dearth of convergence. So right from World Bank to UNDP to USAID, all the programs are oriented around convergence. The biggest problem with our country is that what the Ministry of Skills will do, the Ministry of MSME, small and medium. So skills will give the money for skilling, MSME will give the money for the Common Facility Center, and they expect a private business guy to put the money in for the market. So it's all these three major donors are pushing the Indian government a lot towards convergence. That unless you will get your schemes to converge, which seems to be the most difficult thing to do. So I think as designers, what we really need to think about when you move from aggregation. So my push was aggregation because that was the only way I was thinking about how to get convergence. Convergence of these 6 C's. So in any activity, which is a complex problem, the government of India has siloed everything. So that's their management technique. I don't know whether it's a government management technique, but we see it in ILO, we see it, the guy in this room is not talking to the guy in that room. So when you move away, so even when you look at large companies, this has got to do a lot with our management structures. So essentially the CEO is the aggregator. So, we see it in very large companies also. That it's finally the CEO who's telling all his departments, look, you got to talk to each other and you got to get this off the road. So, yeah. Ego. Yeah. No, so there is every conceivable scheme in the government of India. The 6C model is actually built on a government scheme. Yeah, because they had the scheme for design, they had the scheme for skilling, they had the scheme for capital, they had the scheme for aggregating the artisans into SHGs, but nothing really moved together. It's all there on paper. So similarly, when we are moving to this whole distributed thought process, the whole question, I think what that young man asked as to who is driving the whole thing, who's the driver? So that's the question where in these decentralized models, we have to design that into it. That's all. Yeah. Yes, it should be there. Absolutely. You're completely right.
You are adopting here to enumerate the embodied energy.
I don't know, we have still a lot to learn, but when we are saying that the customer should know, get the picture of the artisan who's made it automatically through the app,
Okay.
he should also know the embodied production energy in it.
Okay.
So
it is going to be definitely labeled.
Yeah.
And have you made any kind of a benchmark for residuals during manufacturing?
Meaning the leftovers.
The leftovers, what do you do with it and how sustainable it is in disposing?
No, it's very interesting because when we work with IKEA, they are very keen that we reuse all our waste. So that's a very interesting input. So how do you program all the waste from every little production unit going into another product? So you're tracking your waste.
Back end.
Yes.
When I am buying the product.
It's like cloth. Like every time we stitch clothes, every month we've got these big bundles of waste fabric. So that can easily go into an applique product.
Okay.
It can easily go into another product.
No, specifically when you mentioned about fibers.
Yes.
So each of these fibers has an enormous amount of residue left.
Absolutely. For biogas.
Yes, biogas. No, it's not just that. The disposal of it is a very complicated process.
Yes.
So when you make maybe a banana fiber bag, so what is left behind, is it been benchmarked in some kind of this is very eco-friendly residue, non-eco-friendly residue? It hasn't been benchmarked, is it?
You're completely right. All this needs to be embedded. Absolutely.
Okay.
Very good inputs. Yeah.
Fine. And have you ever thought of energy independence, madam, for all these people in the entire cluster of 1 million? Have you thought of energy independence, or these are going to be dependent on the state grid?
See, I'll be frank, one of the pilots. So we are very keen to do all kinds of pilots.
Okay.
One of the pilots we are doing is with Smart Power India. This is in UP.
Okay.
This is a project set up by Rockefeller Foundation to solar grid all those villages in UP which don't have any energy.
Okay.
So with them, they're very clear that the grid we'll be working with will be solar. And they want micro enterprises set up that will use that grid. So in some places, but like I'm saying, it's a question of where we get what kinds of partners. But using this energy thing, even now we are in discussion with Celco,
Okay.
that the sewing machines they use
Okay.
can actually use a lot of, they can be those light machines, not those heavy duty jukis, which can use solar energy. Yeah.
Would you be thinking of completely back-end energy integration from the kind of job to be done to the energy that is exactly required for the purpose and how it is taken up vertically?
Oh, we'd love to look at it.
Okay.
Definitely.
Fine. I'll discuss during lunch.
Yeah, sure.
That's my specialty.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah,
See, this whole creative million idea came up.
I'll just repeat the question for the camera.
Yeah.
Could you please explain deaggregation and aggregation?
Yeah. So the whole creative million idea came up because it was clear that you needed aggregation. You needed a common brand. Yeah. I think one of the key reasons for aggregation is brand. Because at the end of the day, you have to sell. So you're building brands for the future. Yeah. And so aggregation is key. Because when you are building a brand, then you're giving a brand promise. That's what a brand is, right? That everything, like he's saying, it'll be fair wage, it'll be built in sustainable production. Then you have to have some methods to check on that brand promise. So in some ways you will aggregate conceptually, yeah, and then you will not sell nonsense. Yeah, in some ways you will curate. Yeah, so it's not that you will sell only to one kind of customer. So you could have a series of brands. You could have a premium brand, you could have a mid-level brand, you could have a value brand. But you will have to aggregate for each of these. So there are advantages to aggregation because you have economies of scale. You have a common learning which is shared across, so everybody is not reinventing the wheel. So there are huge assets to aggregation. But now, how do you do aggregation in a disaggregated way? So is this going to be one monolith company with the same traditional management methods? So again, we come back to this whole Uber business. So it's aggregated on a platform, but it's also very disaggregated, distributed. That's because see, the aggregation should not be the bottleneck. I used to actually be very scared. I said, are we going to build one Soviet type large monolith? Because that's death. Nothing is going to happen. So that's where the whole understanding and seeing how to build this thing out is what we are working on.
Yeah, quite really interesting to see what you're really doing in that. One of the challenges we face in working in the craft to really build that scale and area we come is that we're not using a one craft for one product. Either we're integrating 2-3 crafts or we're integrating technology in a craft. So we make a relevant product for urban, whoever we're looking at. So in that, I think our problems is that where do we assemble all this? Who's going to be our, is there some entrepreneurs building who has a network online or not to really help us build that scale that yes, we will be the final thing in that with the thing. So I just, more of a knowledge we want to know that how do we go about that on that.
Absolutely. See, this is something we've all done for 20 years, we know. So basically there has to be a physical hub. So right now, see, I'm cloning this on whatever knowledge I've gained with my existing ecosystem and trying to bring in a lot of thought processes for the future into it through this whole IT business. Yeah. See, right now we have physical hubs. We have a building. we have a supply chain manager. So 5 materials arrive. Cloth arrives, leather arrives, zip arrives, button arrives. I mean, state of the art. You want to make a Louis Vuitton type quality bag. The inputs have to go into that, right? Yeah. So is it vegetable dyed, or is it tan dyed leather? So you got to go back. We do it for a banana value chain. So SHG group in the village is given 10 types of banana swatches and said you will only select these 3. Those 7 are black. IKEA doesn't want black banana. They only want white banana. Because we fight with IKEA saying, why don't you want black banana? But then that black banana goes into another product. So the processes, everything is available. So it has to be done on a physical and digital. It has to be done on a hub and spoke. All this, and we're doing it right now in a couple of materials. It's possible to do it. It's a question of converging money. We have the capability, we have the manpower. I mean, you can send somebody to the moon or to the Mars. You've got everything. It's a question of bringing all these things, raising the funds for it and doing it. But it is possible. I have zero doubt. Yeah, because earlier we used to say, oh, Amul milk is easy. It's only one raw material. Milk, only milk. Finally, you have to convert that milk. You have to analyze the fat content. Then you have to put it in a chiller, and then you have to boil it in that plant, and then you have to make cheese. You can make chocolate. You can make yogurt. Anything. They're making 1,000 SKUs at the other end. Now, who is managing this ecosystem? Who manages Amul? It's a professional management layer. So even the same thing is going to happen in Creative Million, in .next. We have to raise the money to pay this professional management layer. This can't be hands off. But yes, it cannot be just that professional management layer. I believe that today. You have to have a lot of ways of getting other talent in. Like having apps for designers to come on board on. Having apps for other people to come on. It can't be just this, it can't be the way Amul was done. It has to be Amul plus. So Amul plus Uber or whatever. So it'll happen. So now I have stopped worrying that it's only milk and lot of tension. Because we do a value chain for apparel, we do a value chain for banana, I have done a value chain for wood also. You have to have the seasoning plant, you have to have your FSC certified purchase of wood. You have to raise the money for all those plants and all. You have to do it. You cannot do it without doing all of that. So you got to have a physical hub, but you got to put virtual hubs on it. And you have to learn, but it's possible. Just requires a ton of money. So we are supposed to raise about $10 million in the next year to start this off. So we're on the job. And we're trying to do pilots with a lot of people, and things will happen, yeah. Yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah.
The thing with crafts is when they get privatized, so something like China comes in with some machines and the same things is manufactured very cheaply.
Which is why this layer of information, which is why you build the process and product for the future. See, at the end of the day, that 40% of customer in Europe who want sustainable fashion is very clear they don't want product from China.
But in case of particularly India, so I'll buy something that is the same product is sustainable and the same product is non-sustainable but cheap.
You're completely right.
So I would prefer to buy a product that is cheap.
Of course.
Yeah. So like how do you will cater that?
So see, India is a new economy. Yeah, India, don't expect the Indian to be like the Western consumer for the next 10 to 15 years. Yeah. But so you have to start. So which is why in our model, we've taken 50% of the sales will come from global markets and 50% will come from domestic markets. Yeah. So we've built out a very risk mitigated ecosystem over the last 10, 20 years. You can't depend on global markets. You can't depend on domestic markets. You have to do everything. You have to do local market. So right now the team is working on one tailor app, that all that spare kapda, like after you've sold, you've stitched 10,000 pieces for Fab India, whoever, you're left with 10 meters of that kapda, so that you can sell to a tailor. So the tailor can come and see that you've got all these kapdas with you. All these swatches are available. Then, so there's a boutique app they're working on. So a lot of very, very local stuff is going, where you will give the story, but nobody is going to buy your product for its story. In India, minuscule will buy. Shilpa is here from Jaipur, she'll tell you. She's selling her product on story, she's doing a great job. Okay? So, but it's a niche, right? So, you have to plan for it. That's what I'm saying. Whatever you build today, you plan for 20 years from now. So you need a very long vision for this sector. That's all.
Ma'am, in the meantime, will it be possible to ensure at 1,25,000 rupees to every woman working in the same handicraft or any kind of sector? Because what has been happening is still there are handicrafts or culturally created goods, but eventually machine comes, it gets privatized, and people from outside own the market.
That is why we call it creative manufacturing. See, the basket can be made by the hand, but the apparel will be made using a juki machine. So with this hand and machine conundrum, let us not get caught in it. You must use machine. Why not? If you are going to sell ceramic stoneware plates, you have to use jigger jolly. Why should every plate be thrown on the wheel? So you have to use mass production practices. Why is China sending you goods at such low rate? They are following lean production practices. They have aggregated. They have done all the things we are talking of doing. They've already done it. That's why they're sending to you. But tomorrow, if you have to compete with China, you got to have a China plus story, no? So because you can't compete with China, they've been there, they've done that. So we have to have the China plus story. Meaning China plus sustainability, China plus narrative, China plus social impact. Then we have a hope. Otherwise we have no hope. And all our artisans will become BPO workers.
Sorry, this would be the last point. We're running behind time. Yeah.
Hello. Yeah. See, the difference between an artwork and a copy coming out of a copy machine. Now China is making the copy machines, you are making the artwork. In between, if you can use a copy machine to trace and then fill it up with hand, that becomes a semi-art and a semi-copied machine. Now Chinese are precisely doing that. You need to add the right amount of automation in between, identify the area to speed up per day production and match that minimum wages.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, your artisan is soon going to be out of jobs because it will be a non-sustainable model.
Automation, there is nothing wrong with automation.
No, semi-automation.
Semi-automation.
It should not kill the creativity.
Yes.
Should keep it intact.
Yeah.
But should remove the labor part of it associated.
So the first thing we are doing is, it'll be really helpful, everybody, is defining creative manufacturing. So somebody explained to us that you can define creative manufacturing by saying what is the creative input versus what is the labor input. Till now, creative manufacturing was being viewed as something where the labor must be more. No, the creative input can also be more.
See, like Meghalaya, the cane workers, the process of slicing the cane
should be
was a
mechanized.
very tedious process.
Yes.
Once that was mechanized, his skill and craft was to design the cane artifacts.
Absolutely.
That's where the input comes in. Thank you, madam.
Thank you.